welcome. Welcome to Agenda 2063 TV show, the only show in Ghana, the continent, giving you authentic stories about Africa's integration. And even though we spent the better part of the series talking sometimes about the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're always going to come back to the issue of Agenda 2063 because it is the most important part of Africa's development. A lot of people are talking about it. Hashtag Africa we want, and we always feel on this show, we need to remind people that Africa has a dream. It's the Africa we want, and we need to talk about different aspects, whether it's silencing the guns, whether it's peace and justice, whether it's medical issues. So here we are today, going to talk about good governance in a conversation about the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. So thank you for joining us wherever you are. My name is ZK Benson Jr., your regular host for the show. We're going to take a very, very quick break. And once we're back, we'll get to the studios and speak to our two main guests. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the studio. And the two people I'm going to be interviewing today are Adam Alqali and Suzzie Mwape. Both of you recently were made Aprm champions. Now, for a lot of you joining in, I'm sure you're scratching your head and wondering what are champions, Aprm champions? First of all, what is even Aprm? So I'm going to, since Adam, I've already had a first shot with you, by all means, I'm going to come back to you, but let's start off with ladies first and ask Suzzie to tell us a bit about herself, and then also in her view, what Aprm is about. So Suzzie, if you can join us, please.
All right, thank you very much, Emmanuel. My name is Suzzie Mwape. I'm from Zambia. I'm one of the Aprm Continental Champions. We're recently appointed, and in Zambia, I sit on the National Governing Council of the African Peer Review Mechanism. I also work for a civil society organization known as Common Cause Zambia. Previously, I was head national coordinator for the Civil Society Aprm Secretariat. It was one of its kind on the continent. We had a civil society secretariat whose core job was to work around the Aprm and also complemented the work of the National Secretariat and all the efforts that were being undertaken. So that's a little bit about myself. I won't go into too many details, but coming to the matter at hand, the Aprm is an initiative to which, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on.
All right. Okay, thank you. So about the Aprm is an initiative to which member states of the African Union voluntarily accede to have their governance systems checked. So one of the key criteria to be part of the Aprm process is for a country to first of all be a member of the African Union, and then secondly, to just open itself up to have the governance systems in their respective countries assessed both internally and externally through a process known as a review process. There are 4 areas of governance that are assessed through the Aprm. There's democracy and political governance, economic governance and management, corporate governance, and socioeconomic development. Within these different thematic areas, they bring in different experts who would assess all those different areas. There are also a number of cross-cutting issues that are addressed within the processes, issues such as gender, cross-cutting issues, youth, disability, and all that. It's covered within those comprehensive reviews. Other than the main review that takes place when a country accedes, there are a number of other reviews, such as a targeted review. And with a targeted review, a country can decide on its own to choose what issues affect them so that they can review to help themselves address those problems using the Aprm system as a tool. They bring in...
If I can interrupt, there was recently, Sierra Leone recently produced something on Ebola, lessons of Ebola for the COVID crisis. Was that a target? Is that something they call a targeted review because it was something that affected them?
Yes, indeed, that is a targeted review. So Sierra Leone had that. Zambia had that on mineral resources and tourism. We also had Djibouti also did, it was the first country, Djibouti was the first country to do a targeted review. Uganda has done a targeted review as well. So there's a number of countries that have. The difference between a targeted review and a main review is that a targeted review is shorter. The requirements are less. With the base review, the first review is called a base review. So with the base review, a country goes through the following steps. One, a country decides, once they accede to the process, if they are ready for the review, they have to set up several structures. They will set up a national governing council, they need a focal point, they need a national secretariat, and for the review to begin, the country goes through a process known as a country self-assessment review. And in that process, they assess themselves in the 4 thematic areas I talked about. After that, they write a report, which is sent to the Continental Aprm Secretariat. When the Continental Secretariat reviews that, they bring together a team, which is known as a country review team. That team is usually external people, experts drawn from different countries. They come into a country also to do their own review. And when they do that review, they're able to assess and compare with what was produced in the country self-assessment report. When that is done, they produce that report and they present it to the country. After the report is done from Continental Secretariat, it's sent back to the country. The country can then go through the report and either accept the recommendations and issues found, or they can just accept and work on the recommendations through what is known as a national program of action. So the APRM in itself is 1, about review, but 2, about finding solutions to your problems. And when you find those solutions, you implement them through what is known as a national program of action. After which you produce periodic reports and then later on go for a second review. But for a targeted review, when a country identifies a key problem, for example, in Namibia, they identified issue of youth as a problem and conducted a targeted review aimed at the youth sector only. Through that report, they can then come up with the issues that affect them and do a report and work on that issue. So that is how a targeted review works, and that is also how a base review works. There are 4 other reviews as well that are undertaken through the APRM, and it all depends on at what stage a country is at. But usually every country that accedes starts with the base review, and then they can do any other review, but they are also compelled to do a national progress report periodically so that we are able to track the progress and implementation of the views and issues that are highlighted in a national report.
Clearly, Suzzie, with the way in which you describe it, it sounds as if it's quite a complicated structure, not in a bad way, in a very good way, in the sense that it's because clearly you've been working on it for many years, it comes to you like water. A lot of people may not understand and may feel it's yet one of those AU things. Help us understand why the APRM is regarded as one of the most innovative governance programs, not just on the continent, but in the world. Help us understand that.
For me, Emmanuel, I would say that I perceive the APRM as one initiative that takes democracy beyond the ballot box. When we talk about democracy, most times it's about thinking of the ballot when you go for elections. That's the only time that most times that's the only time that citizens in any given country have an opportunity to say how they want to be governed or what kind of governance system they want. The APRM gives citizens an opportunity to express themselves and say how they want to be governed because of how robust the process of review itself is undertaken. So for example, when a country self-assessment report is being put together, citizens, the criteria for who is eligible to participate in those reviews is very, very clear. They will mention citizens, they'll talk about youth, they'll pretty much talk about every sector of society. Everyone is free to go and talk about how they want to be governed. And where they're not able to express themselves clearly, they can still write even individual reviews. They can just write a paper with a document that talks about what affects them. So if, say, for instance, you're looking at corporate governance. What issues, if for me as a woman, I feel that there are key issues around corporate governance that that affect women. As a citizen, I'm able to just write a paper and submit it and say, these are my views, and they're easily taken on board. It's very rare that you get that.
Hang on, slow down. So basically, any ordinary citizen can pick up something and say, look, I have an issue with my country here, and then submit this to the APRM.
Yes, the submission, you can just write an individual submission. That is very much open. The APRM is not elitistic. It doesn't choose who can participate in that process. Anybody can participate in that process. It's very open. And also, the other than people who can write, when the country review mission comes into a country, they meet with different stakeholders. And part of their criteria is that you should ensure civil society is there, this sector and that sector, government, quasi-government institutions, academicians, everyone. But in addition to that, even citizens are allowed to go to those hearings because they are usually public and in open spaces. And one of the things that each country is supposed to do is to explain which province, for instance, or which county they are going to. They will explain that, and anyone has got access to going there. Beyond that, if you're not comfortable going to those places, you can also request, once a country review mission comes into your country, you can actually request a one-on-one with them, where you can go and explain what it is that bothers you and why you think it's important that it finds itself in the national report. So there are all those different avenues that really, really open it up to the lowest level that allows anybody to come on board and express themselves and talk about how they want to be governed.
In your view, though, before I come to Adam, in your view, though, why is it that many people have not been opening up to the APRM, have not been coming? Is it primarily because of this whole issue of visibility and communications, that they don't really know what it's about? They hear that a team has come to the country, they've left some reports, they're in the media, and then they go. Would you attribute the lack of engagement by citizens to the APRM on that area?
Okay, thank you. I think, frankly, over the past few years, we're seeing more and more people coming on to the APRM and beginning to understand the process. I think when the APRM started around around 2013, all the way maybe up to 2015, 2016, there were very few people who understood the APRM because of how it was packaged. It was a very technical issue. Just the words themselves, African Peer Review Mechanism, it sounded quite technical. And so it is how APRM was being packaged then. Now that we are beginning to break down the APRM to smaller bite-sized pieces, we are seeing more and more people coming on board. For instance, we are seeing more young people beginning to engage with the APRM, because back then it was mostly a club of old men, very few women who would engage in the APRM process. When I joined the APRM, started doing APRM work, it was very rare that I'd see young people, but now we have youth. We even have a youth desk at the Continental Secretariat, where we have one young man, Lennon, who heads that desk and has brought a lot of young people on board. We have a lot of women coming on board with the APRM, and so it's improving. We are seeing a great improvement from where we started and where we are today. However, I think the packaging of the APRM is very critical, and we need to begin to look at the APRM not as a holistic tool, but as a tool that people can understand. So for instance, if you walk into a community and tell someone, we are here to discuss socioeconomic issues, they will not understand, they can't engage with you. But if you go into a community and tell people, we would like to talk about your access to water, access to good health, they begin to understand and they can relate to those issues, which mean the same thing. But once you break it and explain it in a way that people can understand and relate to, it simplifies their understanding and makes it more appealing for them to come on board. So packaging of the APRM, publicity, awareness, and how you inform people. The youth of South Africa recently wrote a submission, an APRM submission, that they have given to I think they submitted to their National Governing Council as issues that affect the youth that should go into the main report. And when you look at the way the report was published, it's a very light document. It's got infographics in it. It just simplifies. Once you look at the document, it doesn't look like a heavy, boring document. Anyone can pick it up and read it. I think those are some of the things that matter. Those are some of the things that make people begin to engage with processes without being left behind or being intimidated by language, by heavy text to read, but by simplified day-to-day language that each and every person can relate to and understand.
You're getting me really excited about the opportunities and the possibilities of APRM, realizing that there's a lot more that is happening than we actually realize. Now I'm going to come to you, Adam. Packaging. You're someone who does packaging very well. I've read a lot of your stories before, even though I won't dare admit it. But I read a lot of your articles on how you package the African Union agencies and what they do. Now that you are an APRM champion, given what you have heard from Suzzie, your co-champion, what in your view are some of the possibilities that are there for packaging in your write-ups, in your engagement with your colleagues, your colleague media and so on, packaging this whole issue of APRM? That's the first question. The second part of that question is trying to find out from you, what is this the level of engagement that you expected APRM to be when you first joined the Communicators Network? Are you a bit more surprised now that they're actually a bit more on the ground than a lot of us imagined? Adam.
Okay, thank you, Bensa. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the work we are doing, as communicators, on the continent, particularly in relation to APRM in this instance. Yeah. With regards to their first question, asking, how to better communicate the APRM, if I'm right, if I got you right, that's what you're asking, right?
Yes, yes.
So like Suzzie said, the APRM is a very important, organ, or rather specialized agency of the African Union. In fact, one of the most important, I would say, because governance, is if you like our biggest, headache on the continent. If we are able to address governance challenges, we'll be able to, address most of our other challenges. Someone said the other day that 80% of Africa's problems are governance related. So this indeed speaks, volume of the importance, of APRM as an institution for the African people, not just for the African Union. In terms of packaging this important agency of the African Union, I believe we have a lot to do, like Suzzie was also saying earlier. The fact is, the African Union itself, is not known to the African people, unfortunately, you get me. The perception among, the common, even those who know about it, is that this is, an agency, of, a union of African heads of state, you get me. I remember there's this campaign by ECOWAS, the Economic Community of African States, to make ECOWAS of the people, to bring it closer to the people. And I think we also need the African Union to become an AU of the people, because when people know about this institution, and they know what it does, the value it is going to bring to their lives, then they'll better appreciate the work it's doing, and they will be able to engage, with the union. And that's where the role of the media comes in. You get me? There's no way, you can communicate the African message, the African agenda. I've always said this, without the media. Any plan, any attempt, to communicate the African message, to the African people, will not succeed without working with the media. So how can the APRM, the question here is, how can the APRM work with the media to, to promote itself, the important work it's doing in terms of governance on the African continent. To do that, and I think certain steps have been taken already. The communications network, which we are all members of, I think is the first stage. But then we need to strengthen this communications network. We need to, make it, support it, support the members of the network to communicate the APRM message to the African people. If we don't do that, I assure you, Bensa, we continue to have this kind of discussion that nobody knows about APRM in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. But if we are able to empower the communicators network, where the Aprm is able to bring journalists closer to themselves, the Aprm is able to work with media institutions around the continent, then we are definitely going to see, more African people understand the role of the Aprm, more African people appreciate the great work it's doing in terms of country reviews, the full reviews, the targeted reviews, and what have you, and then ultimately, engaging with their governments on these issues, on the reports, on the national programs of actions, which will ultimately, result in better governance, service delivery on the continent.
And Adam, it looks like we don't have much time as far as the Aprm is concerned, because there's this date of 2023. Help us understand what is so special about 2023 with respect to the Aprm.
So as part of it is, of this, strategic plan of the Aprm for 2016 to 2020, one of the, priorities, of that plan, which was aimed at revitalizing the hitherto, what has been referred to as dying Aprm at the time, was this campaign towards, ensuring that all members of the African Union, 55 members of the African Union, have acceded to the Aprm. As some of us might know, the Aprm is a voluntary mechanism that is acceded to by member states of the African Union, after which they undergo several kinds of reviews, beginning with the base review, the second review, the targeted reviews, and what have you. So the universal campaign towards universal accession by 2023 is a campaign by the African Parity Mechanism to ensure that now out of the 55 member states, 41 member states are members of the Aprm, with the last being the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is currently chairing the African Union, being the last to join, earlier this year. So what the campaign is about is ensuring that all the members of the African Union, 55 countries, member states, have also acceded to the African Parity Mechanism and become members of the mechanism. The idea behind this is to ensure that the work of the Aprm reaches the nooks and crannies of the continent. Because if a member does not accede to the mechanism, then there's no way the Aprm is going to be able to impact on governance activities on such countries. But then, people are, some of the critics of the universal accession campaign are arguing that, merely having countries join, the Aprm is not enough. Aprm will, beyond that, ensure that members that have joined, are active, because we have got a number of members of the Aprm that have joined over a decade ago, but have been very dormant. They haven't even undergone the phase review. So in a situation where members join, and then they do nothing, in terms of improving their governance situation, then the whole purpose for which the founders of the Aprm, the likes of President Obasanjo of Nigeria, Thabo Mbeki of Ghana, Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, the purpose would have been defeated. So what the Aprm has to ensure that as it campaigns towards universal accession, which we strongly feel is going to happen by 2023, is ensure that it makes the Aprm, it gives member states of the Aprm the cause, the reason to be active, by providing incentives and value, for their membership. That's the only way, these members will be able to become active in the Aprm. And beyond that, Aprm, like other governance mechanisms, like the OGP, it's also been, called, criticized for, like, not having, a mechanism for enforcing, for ensuring that members who have joined but have not, adhered to the principle of the Aprm are in a way, let me use this word, in court, punished, for their inaction, because it doesn't make sense, for countries to join into this mechanism and then do nothing after. And then do nothing. It doesn't make sense. This is not going to, give us the Africa we want. So the Aprm has to, as it campaigns towards national accession by 2023, also ensure that, members who have joined but have not done anything, for 5-10 years, also, are made to account, for their membership.
That's a very, very good point. This is where I come to you again, Suzzie. There are two things that are circulating in my mind for now. Number one, are there any levels of enforcement mechanisms for the Aprm for member states that have joined but have not been doing anything beyond moral suasion, encouraging them that, oh, please come and do your thing? Is there any, because as Adam was saying, what is the point of them joining and then them not doing anything? And the APRM Secretariat, with all the work that they have to do, now trying to get them to do the work. In your view, so the second offshoot of that question, therefore, is would, apart from the champions that have been selected, would the APRM benefit from something like a special envoy? Let me give you a very quick example. I used it yesterday in a webinar. The African Medicines Agency, okay, last week just reached its 15th ratification, signature and ratification. We are hoping that by 2022, the African Medicines Agency should now start looking for a host member state and then start finding structures to start running. This has been made possible simply because of the dynamism of a special envoy in the name of Michel Sidibé, who used to work with UNAIDS. He was working with Mali in the Ministry of Health, and he's a UNAIDS specialist for many years. The AU decided to pick him in April this year to rally around the low-hanging fruits of the African Medicines Agency. They wanted to get 15 ratifications, and in April, the ratifications and signatures were just around 4 or 5. Within 2 months, Sidibé had been able to rally both Francophone and Anglophone member states, gotten signatures. So there are more signatures now than there were 2 months ago, and some of them have actually now ratified. Within just 2 months, Sidibé has been able, using his Twitter account and other communication stuff, been able to get 15 plus ratifications. For me, this is a success story of what the AU can do when it really put its mind to it. Getting a special envoy who was supporting the work of the structures, of the groundwork that had already been laid out for the African Medicines Agency. Would the APRM, beyond the champions that have been selected, benefit from having something like an APRM envoy, given the target date of 2023 that we have, where we need to see more, about 40 member states accede? Can we do with that? Is this something that is feasible in your view? Suzzie. Julian, your mic, please, if you can unmute. On vous entend, s'il vous plaît. Julien.
Ah oui, oui. Bonjour tout le monde.
Ok, merci beaucoup.
Je peux parler en français?
Oui, vous pouvez parler en français, mais j'avais une question pour Suzzie. Elle devrait me demander, en fait, elle devrait une réponse pour moi. Donc, est-ce que vous pouvez après l'entretien?
D'accord, il n'y a pas de souci.
Ok, merci beaucoup.
After Suzzie, please, there's no problem.
Okay, so Suzzie, you got my question? Is Suzzie there with us?
Yes, I'm here, Emmanuel. I heard your question. I was waiting for you to finish speaking to Julian. I was saying that for me, the issue of having an envoy for the APRM is something that conflicts me a little bit, in the sense that I think the APRM has come full circle. Where we are now and where we're trying to get to in 2023, which is universal accession, is it's not very far. Okay. First of all, maybe I'll take you a little bit back. In 2017, the Continental Secretariat was given an expanded mandate to monitor the implementation of Agenda 2063, which automatically meant that the Continental Secretariat was no longer dealing with issues of the APRM only. And also remember that by doing that, they are no longer dealing only with member states that have acceded to the APRM. So that means they are looking at a wider scope that they're engaging. And over the past few years, at the time from 2017, around that time, the Continental Secretariat had three agendas. They were talking about revitalization of the APRM, because I think based on even what Adam had said, the APRM had gone dead. Very few activities were happening. There were a lot of staff challenges at the secretariat. There was no CEO in the secretariat, so decision-making was limited. We had less country review missions, and very, very few countries acceding and coming onto the process. So they went into a mode where they were talking about the importance of revitalization, reinvigorating and renewing the APRM process. And I think those particular issues to a large extent have been met, in the sense that we now have more people talking about the APRM. The mandate of the APRM Secretariat itself has expanded beyond just APRM to Agenda 2063. And now we are also looking at more initiatives coming up under the APRM itself. Things like the adjustment of the questionnaire. We now have the Africa Governance Reports, which is being produced. Yes, there are a lot of things that we can strengthen within those processes, but I think so much has changed and so much has improved. And an additional thing that I can point out is that we've also noticed that in the recent past, the CEO of the APRM's Secretariat, Professor Maloka, has been going to a number of countries that are not members to try and get them to join the APRM process. And through those efforts, we have seen countries such as Zimbabwe coming on board, they've acceded. We've seen countries like the DRC coming on board. That shows that there are efforts that are being made. In my view, it would be prudent to utilize the panel of eminent persons, because the APRM structure has got a panel of eminent persons, eminent people who lead these country reviews. They are eminent, and they are chosen based on the regions they come from, and there's a whole criteria used to select them, including how much they have contributed towards Pan-Africanism. So these are generally well-respected people. Maybe it would be prudent to get some of those panel members to begin to go to even those countries that are not part of the process, to get on board and help towards the goal of getting to universal accession. Otherwise, I feel like getting an envoy is now, blotting the structure further, because when you bring the envoy, what sort of person are you bringing that is not already within the space of what we have as the structure of the APRM? So that would be my view on that particular issue. The issue of envoy is good, but I think we have people that maybe are being underutilized, that can be utilized even more by ensuring that we get that panel and use those panel members to go to different countries and help us get to universal accession by 2023. Thank you.
I like the fact your optimism that we're almost there. We have 41 member states, right, so far that have acceded. So we just need 14 more. And I think between now and 2023, that can be done. I need to ask you another important question, Suzzie. How come countries in East Africa seem to be doing the APRM very, very well? We know that in Kenya, in 2008, the late Kofi Annan was there. And I think when some of us look back on it at the time when we didn't really understand APRM that much then, we see that that was probably the rudiments of an APRM that was gaining experience, was coming to life. We now know that Kenya has changed its constitution. We also know the many developments that has happened in Kenya, where we now see that Kenya has even gone to the extent of domesticating APRM. They have in the different counties that they have. So they have county reviews. They're working on those kind of things. And meanwhile, countries like my home Ghana that started the APRM back in 2003 have become very, very dormant. I can't go sadly and go and whip up my presidents and say that come and shake the foundations of APRM again. But at least I can use the best practice of countries like Kenya, Uganda, that has also been praised very well on APRM, to say, and even South Africa as well, with the establishment of new national governing councils and so on, and the youth activism around the APRM. We've seen some work that the South Africa Institute of International Affairs, even that link with the youth, around APRM is helping mobilize a lot of sentiments around and visibility on APRM. So back to my question is, in your view, as someone who has worked on APRM for quite a while, seeing the quiet period and then the more active period with the people like Professor Maloka, why, in your view, is East Africa doing so well, and what best practice can we pick from there to help inform some of the other countries that are not doing so well?
Well, Emmanuel, talking about the APRM and saying one person is doing so well and the other is not doing so well, is quite contentious, you know.
Okay. Okay.
It's a little bit contentious because, I mean, first of all, the principles of the APRM are that the APRM is not a scorecard. You're not judged against another country, but you make a very fair point. In terms of activity, we are seeing more activity in East Africa. But maybe let me take you a little bit, like, let's take a few steps back and remember where we are coming from. For me, it's extremely sad to hear that Ghana is not doing so well, because when the APRM started, Ghana was one of the countries with best practice. We went everywhere singing songs about Ghana and how well it had done with the APRM. And even I personally, in my youngest, I think I came to Ghana for the first time in 2008. Zambia acceded to the APRM in 2006. And when I was learning and reading about the APRM, the only examples of best practices I came across were Ghana, because Ghana made real practical changes when they did their first review. It was one of the first countries to accede, one of the first countries to complete the process, one of the first countries to actually implement the recommendations very well. That is where we saw cabinet being fired and reducing the size of cabinet, and so many adjustments were made in Ghana as a result of the report that came from the APRM. Those are the sort of stories that we want to hear, because when you talk about improvement in governance, you want it to translate to real things, tangible things that you can point to and touch. And so I think as our champion and as our leader, Emmanuel, you need to go back to your president and remind him that Ghana was a pillar of hope, and you know, you can do it again, because I think you should be due for a second review, and there's no harm starting from there. Anyway, to answer the question on East Africa, we also need to remember that the APRM process in itself provides an early warning system. And the case of Kenya, which you talked about, I would like to bring the case of Kenya when it underwent its first review. The recommendations that came out of that first review for Kenya, one of them was the issue of ethnicity. And I remember that the Kenyan government did not agree or did nothing about the issues that came out of their recommendations to deal with ethnicity. And then we had that sad event that happened after elections where the country went into war and whatnot. But beyond that, I think then a country like Kenya, it is very much expected for them to have more, to be more aware and more interested in understanding that early warning system that it provides, such that they institutionalized the APRM and took it to county level so that it continues to provide that early warning, or the early warning system that the APRM provides. Maybe East Africa is more active now because they are looking at different aspects, but for me, the question becomes, how is the implementation of the National Program of Action happening? We have a lot of reviews. We also have a lot of reports that are sitting collecting dust. To what extent are these countries reporting? I think I would like us to now shift from just talking about reviews, but looking at the implementation of the programs of actions and how those things are actually translating into the lives of the ordinary citizens in those countries, because that is where the learning points are, because that is where the value of the APRM lies. Yes, you are going to talk about your problems. Yes, you are going to share your best practices. Yes, you are going to produce a report, but what does that amount to? Because it also is a very costly exercise. It's very expensive. It costs a lot of money. And if you do that process and then you go and file your reports, then there's no point in you just saying, okay, we have people who have signed, but they're not doing anything. Yes, we have people who have acceded to the process and have not started their first review, but we also have people who have undergone review, but are not implementing their programs of actions. So it's a two-way street, and we need to begin to think that as we go forward, while we have, you know, revitalized, reinvigorated, renewed the APRM process, now look towards implementation of this particular process and ensuring that there's value for money and real tangible benefits for respective countries that have undergone the process. We want to be able to tangibly measure what a country was before APRM and how well they've benefited. In the case of Ghana, back then, I can, you know, even as a Zambian, I can tell you what the achievements were, what the profits were, and why a lot of people were inspired by the case of Ghana to go and accede into the process. Maybe what we need are countries that are also APRM country champions that people can learn from and also be inspired to do more around around the APRM, and also just maximize on how good this initiative is. Thank you.
Oh, great. Then I think I'll be looking for APRM to set up an office for me. I'll be very happy to do that. In wrapping up, Adam, I'm sure both of us have been learning a great deal from Suzzie, who has been running this for quite a while. It's no surprise that clearly she's one of the champions. But as for some of us who have joined the bandwagon and on a learning curve as well, can you, in wrapping up in the next 2 or 3 minutes, help us understand, in your view, what are some of the things that you plan to do in the engagement of media? Because we need the buy-in of media to make this work, given the new processes, the new strategies that APRM also has under its sleeve, the expanded mandate of 2017-2018, monitoring Agenda 2063, monitoring SDGs, and it now has a gender program and is doing some great work, other great work that will come to light hopefully next year. What, in your view, can you begin to do very quickly to help whip up sentiments among your media colleagues to make sure they appreciate the work that APRM is doing?
Okay, Bensa, before then, I would like to, add my voice to the, to your suggestion about having a special envoy. Yeah. While I agree that, with, Lennon's suggestion on the chat box that, members of the APRM panel, feminine persons, are in a good position to promote this idea of universal accession. What I would like to say is that, no doubt, these are eminent, Africans, who are members of this panel. But, when it comes to, this kind of things, these are, presidential level kind of things. So I don't think there's harm in having someone like Obasanjo or Mbeki, becoming the champion of APRM's universal accession, because reason being, these are people, who are respected all around the continent. These are people who can talk to these presidents, one-on-one, you get me? They are peers, you get me? And these are people who are founding fathers of the APRM, who understand the idea and the message of the APRM and are passionate about it, hence can be in a well-placed, to promote this idea of universal accession. So I feel, whereas, we can still get, utilize, the influence of the panel members, I think there's no harm in having either Obasanjo or President Mbeki, becoming, a champion of universal accession of the APRM. And if that is done, I assure you, what CDB has been able to achieve, well, I'm not trying to belittle it, but we'll be like a chess play, because those people, are really influential. I mean, we all understand, the kind of influence
that they have,
they have, and at that highest of highest. Talking about how to, promote, the APRM message, in the media. We were in Nairobi in September, for a meeting, second meeting of the Communicators Network. And we've discussed elaborately, on how to leverage, the power of the media in promoting the APRM message to the African people. We have got a communication strategy, a very beautifully crafted one. All I will say is that my mandate, as an APRM Communicators Network champion, is to facilitate partnership between APRM and media organizations around the continent. I've discussed, I've given suggestions, quite a number of suggestions, most of which, have been incorporated into the communication strategy. So my call on the APRM is to help us implement that, communication strategy through the Communicators Network. The Communicators Network, if empowered, if supported, is well placed, to support the work of promoting the APRM among the African media and fostering good relations with the media, between APRM and the media. So all my call on the APRM is to help us, implement that strategy, help us, continue to strengthen the Communicators Network, and I assure you we'll get there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Adam. Regrettably, we have run out of time. So your question, Julien, malheureusement, on ne peut pas prendre votre question, mais si vous pouvez écrire votre question pour moi sur WhatsApp, je peux communiquer pour les gens Mwape. Est-ce que ça vous convient? Julianne. If we don't have Julianne, I was basically asking Julianne if she can ask a question. She should do a write-up of a question, and we can convey that to Aprm so that we can take care of some of the questions. And for those who have not been able to ask the questions, we can also do so, not necessarily in the chat box. I think most of you are either on the WhatsApp platform or have access to my email or my WhatsApp as well. You can also send that so that we can quickly work with them and see how we incorporate that into becoming the most important things that we can send to Aprm for us to all work on. But basically, Suzzie, I want to say thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule at a time that Zampower has decided to disappoint you. Thank you. It was very, very, very insightful conversation. Adam as well. I know that you gave some very, very interesting points last time as well. And today we gave the floor to Suzzie to say a lot, given her experience. But this is only part one of many other conversations. And if you're able to make it to Accra, by all means, we'll definitely continue the conversation in Accra as well. But Suzzie, thank you so very much. It's always great hearing you, listening to you, learning from you. And congrats to the great work that you've done for Zambia, for Zambia's work on Aprm and what you're doing as an Aprm champion as well. We shall be knocking on your door to be learning a lot as well from you. And Adam as well, thank you so very much for the great work you do also, continuing to champion AU work, AU, packaging the AU in your inimitable style of writing and quietly brilliant way you handle things. Thank you so very much for doing that. And for all those who took time out of your schedule to join us, thank you so very much. We are happy that this new style that we're trying with Agenda 2063 seems to be working very well. Next week, we'll have a show, but next week, we will be at the Africa Private Sector Summit. We will be there every day, and the Agenda 2063 TV show will be live. So for those of you who have been following us on WhatsApp, please continue to do so. There's going to be a lot of conversation on the African Continental Free Trade Area, regional economic communities, and many other things related to Africa's development. And we will definitely have someone from Aprm there. Someone from Aprm is flying down. I won't tell you who, but they're definitely coming down. And we hope to be interviewing her as well on this show next week. So have yourselves a great day and keep the conversation going. My name is E.K. Benson Jr. Nice coming into your homes, your laptops, and we hope to speak to you next week at the Africa Private Sector Summit. Have yourself a great day, and thanks to the great work of production team. Chiefy, thank you. All the best. Have a great day. Goodbye.